On Friday the 15th of May 2026, Gameoverse became the 8th show in Glitch's catalogue and 2nd in its foray into the 2D animation sphere. However, despite the capable female main character with its quirky sidekick formula that we've come to enjoy from this company over the past half-decade, there is something very unique about this particular production. You probably felt it as well going into the pilot. Even if you couldn't place your finger on exactly what was different, there is clearly something going on with this show that makes it feel off. But that's what this video is for. Today we'll be taking a look at some of the creative decisions within this pilot, good and bad, to reveal how Gameverse feels like a show from the wrong decade. Let's get into it. We'll begin with our central characters, and there are quite a few of them as we have a team of heroes helping the villain and a team of villains helping the hero. Try to keep up. Our core duo is Kit, skilled fighter and expertly placed furry bait, it really didn't take that long, and Caboodle, mechanical backpack with a bad temper, also known as Schlatt.
Ray, maybe he can write our obituaries after he gets us both killed.
Immediately from this goofy naming convention, we can see that this show is not going to take itself very seriously, despite the big budget the Glitch has for this and the animation quality, which we will get to later. As for the characters themselves, there's a very nice dynamic between the two of them. Kit is an altruist and has a tremendous amount of guilt weighing on her mind, causing her to want to save as many people as possible despite the limited resources and time available to her. Caboodle, meanwhile, is a little more grounded, the straight man of the two. He's bound to Kit and definitely wants to help the mission, but he understands the fact that you can't save everyone, and having useless people around may slow them down and do more harm than good in the long run. In this aspect, he is very correct, because the useless character he has a fight with Kit about keeping at the start of the episode is Gobbles the Lernosaurus, who not only does not help the situation, but actively allows the planet to get destroyed through a strange sequence of events that I've talked about in a short that sarcastically calls him the real villain of the series. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of assuming people on the internet understood sarcasm. Aside from that, I'm not really a big fan of this character. His shift from stone cold useless and scared of everything, including the water, to brave and courageous happens a little bit too fast, and the goofy dialogue that accompanies it does not help matters. It is part of a nice piece of characterization for Kit, but the way it implements Gobbles misses the mark here. Speaking of missing the mark with the switching of a tone of a character too quickly, let's talk about the main antagonist of this show. Warwick is a terrible example of trying to have your cake and eat it too. The first scene he is in makes him look like a complete moron. He can't control his own arms, is temperamental like a child, and keeps referencing this unfunny joke character. Then, during the end of the episode, he suddenly turns into a strong, aggressive leader with no tolerance for failure and a demeaning attitude towards Fold and misinformation. I would have liked to see this character kept completely serious from the start because he can be very menacing. He's imposing and despite his brash nature is actually quite intelligent. The problem is, that's not very well conveyed during our first impression of him, and as we know, those matter and influence how Warwick is going to be seen throughout the rest of the show. A good comparison here is the introduction of Kylo Ren in the Star Wars sequels. Kylo is also a very strong, reasonably intelligent antagonist, but because he gets made fun of throughout his introduction, it immediately reduces his level of threat to the audience. Now onto his lackeys. Fold and Misinformation are the main counterparts to Kit and Caboodle during this episode, despite the presence of a literal evil version of them also existing. I'm actually a huge fan of these two characters and the way they're set up as references to the annoying and unhelpful tips you find in games. They fill their roles perfectly, both in the case of what they are doing by influencing the game world and being a fantastic pair that you love to hate. As for Flappers and Snappers, there really isn't much to cover here. They're used more as plot devices than actual characters during the pilots because they are the win conditions for both sides. I imagine this will be a long-running theme in the show, with the characters' introduction having them confined to the game world and then potentially experiencing the rest of their personalities in the episodes after if Kit and Caboodle fail to stop the game from being completed. That being said, despite being somewhat one-note, they are entertaining enough, and it sets up an interesting little philosophical conundrum for the audience, with Snappers specifically. Snappers isn't really all that evil when you get down to it. He knows he has an obligation to defeat Flappers and he is very focused on that goal, but he isn't a bad person and he doesn't want more harm to come to people than he sees as absolutely necessary. This choice makes it a lot easier for the viewer to actually root for him to win the fight with the game world's protagonist, which is clearly what Ross wants to happen. The thing is, that can't always be the case. There will come points in the series where Kit and Caboodle will have to help genuinely evil individuals, individuals who cause suffering to the other residents of their game worlds. Sure, if the game gets completed, they will all die, but is that really a worse option than an eternity of suffering under a tyrannical villain that can't be defeated? Now we move away from the characters and onto the story, and at the moment I'd say it's just solid. The opening tells us that there is a conflict going on between two agencies in the Gameverse, the Syntax run by Warwick and the Farcade by Dusk. Warwick seems to be insistent on securing some sort of power from the destroyed game worlds to reclaim something that was taken from him, potentially his own game world. Dusk, meanwhile, is much more elusive to us at the moment. We don't really know what he wants or why he's doing any of this, just that he has a problem with Warwick and the Syntax. It is very likely that we will meet him in the next episode as Kit reports back, but until then the greater conflict of this show is unknowable. The self-contained story of the episode is nothing special, but it's not bad by any means, so this is very much a wait and see area of the show, though I'm optimistic. Something that is much more certain and I have a much better opinion on is the dialogue and voice acting, which is fantastic. It's not fantastic in the way that something like Digital Circus is, where everything has a deep meaning and it does a great job of simulating how real people behave. No, this is fantastic for almost the opposite reason. See, Gameoverse was first shown to the world as a series of short animations in 2009 for Playboy of all companies. Since that point, Ross has worked on more content surrounding the series during his time at Game Grumps and then later independently while he searched for a studio to turn the game into reality. He's been doing that for a long time, and while the landscape surrounding the show and indie animation as a whole has changed a lot, the way in which the show is written hasn't. Everything about this screams mid-2010s. The humor, the dialogue, the way scenes are cut and stitched together are all from a different time, because Ross drafted this script ages ago, and those ideas don't just go away. It leans far more into the slapstick and lol random ideas of humor that my Astaf movie and Vine-loving self was enjoying throughout the entire pilot. It also explains why Glitch as a company specifically wanted to pick this show. Glitch was originally an offshoot of SMG4, who used to run that same sort of humor that started around the same time as the show was first being written, so clearly they have similar interests. The exemplar of this entire idea is Caboodle, voiced by Jay Schlatt and importantly using his default microphone. The quality of his audio is notably different to every other character in the show, and you can imagine every single line is being said by him. Normally, having different voice qualities would be a horrible criticism of a show, but with this it just works. It brings you back into last decade, where indie animation was nowhere near as high quality as it is now, and there was a much smaller budget attached to it. It goes the same for Aaron Hansen's multiple characters in the episode as well, that both have really goofy, overdone voices. This feels less like a big cinematic production and more like a passion project made by a small group of friends in their free time, and that is a nostalgic feeling for many people who grew up with YouTubers who only made videos for the fun of it and not for the money or fame. Some of the younger people watching this video now, God, I feel old, may not fully get that, but for the late teens and early 20-year-olds who started watching Glitch shows when they first appeared, you will probably get me. It's the same kind of magic that made all of the comedy skit channels of the 2010s so fun to watch, and the nostalgia hits real hard. But of course, it wouldn't be a modern day production without some controversy, and in Gameoverse's case, it is because of the art direction. More specifically, the way in which its female characters are drawn. There's a long-standing issue with a lot of 2D animation and media in general, that girls often have the same typically feminine body type, while the guys get a whole varied range. The girls often tend to get sexualized a lot more in the media with things like beach episodes, which this pilot is. I'm not here to debate that this is not a thing that happens within media in general, because it does, and has done for quite a while. Some people who watch these kind of shows are very horny and perverted, and fan service to them has put me off my fair share of animes in the past few years. What I will debate, however, is that Gameverse is not one of these shows. To begin with, the number of female characters actually in this show and not used as background right now is 4. Kit, Misinformation, Malice, and Crab Girl. Now, one of these characters immediately bucks the trend of all girls having the same body type, and the other is an evil version of the main character, so obviously they're gonna look alike. Our attention then is drawn to Kit and Misinformation, who are also the only characters to wear swimsuits in the pilots. Are these outfits quite revealing? Well, yes, they're both bikinis. Do Kit and Misinformation both have very feminine body types, including very wide hips? Yes. Are they fan service? Not really. They're both fighters and adventurers, so you can expect them to be quite well toned. And as for their clothing, they're on an ocean world. Swimwear makes the most sense for them to be wearing. Could they have been drawn in bodysuits? Yes, but that's really more of a stylistic choice at that point. The only real gripe I have with this is the scene here where misinformation gets wrapped up in rope and then is immediately released in the next shot, but I think I'm hating on that more for its non-continuity. To the art in general though, and I am a big fan of this style. It's very adaptable to the different game worlds that we will be travelling through in this series, with enough detail to make the more mature games feel menacing, but not so much that the more childish games feel out of place. The opening fight scene between Kit and Malice is the absolute highlight of this. It's fast and dynamic, and actually quite brutal, which I did not at all expect from this show going in. If we get to experience more worlds similar in tone to Kit's, then I will be very hyped to watch this in the future, because the animation is fantastic. Another great aspect of this style is again that it links back to the 2010s, with these short quality drops when something sudden or shocking happens. Again, this is an old style of humour, but it's not really something I see much of anymore, and is a great addition to this show. So overall, I'm very satisfied with the Gameoverse pilot. There is a lot to like, but also some things to improve. And as is absolutely always the case, Twitter is crashing out about something that really isn't all that big of a deal. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.